Okay, stitch meditations are small, it's like a moving meditation. I got really sick a long time ago, and basically I had to redo my whole life because I was very go, well, still go, but very kind of a perfectionist, that kind of thing. So oh yeah. So I had to really think about how I was living my life. And I just had extreme amounts of stress, and that's really what made me sick. So in doing that, I started trying to meditate. And I tried to meditate for years, and it just never worked. I always felt like I was doing it wrong, or I just couldn't keep focus on it. You know, I would do guided meditations. I would just try and sit there and, clear my mind. I started thinking about how else I could meditate. And I thought about moving meditations, like a walking meditation. But I have a walking partner I walk with every morning. And there is no way I will go do another walk all by myself. Because you can't really meditate while you're walking with somebody else. We're just doing this the whole time. Talking about books and solving all the world's problems. So I couldn't add in another walk. So I probably could have if I was really dedicated, but it just didn't seem to make sense. So I was trying to think of something else that would be not weather dependent and didn't depend on anybody else. And in the past few years, I've really been doing a lot of hand stitching. And I just love hand stitching. I started off my whole art career as an embroiderer. And so it just seemed natural to do that. There's just something so relaxing when you get the tips of your fingers involved in what you're doing. It just seems to calm all the nerves, because you're doing it's a fine motor skill, but it's also tactile and luscious. And so that's how I started doing stitch meditations. So basically it's between a 15-minute to a half hour, sometimes 45-minute meditation where I'm using stitch to kind of clear my mind and not think about things, or to kind of keep as a refocusing point. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when you're doing a walking meditation, walking a labyrinth, it's when you change directions, that's like a refocus on going inward. So my stitch meditations are little collages. I start with a pile of stuff because I have lots of leftover fabric bits and paper bits and this and that. So I just start with those and put a few pieces together and stitch on it. I have a few rules.
Okay, what are your rules?
So the rules are, you can't take more than 5 minutes to pick out your fabrics.
Okay.
3 minutes is better, because if you spend more than that, then it becomes this project and you're spending too much time culling and trying to make something pretty. Sometimes I'll actually choose a fabric I really don't like to start with, and then just see where it goes. Not every stitch meditation is a piece of art in itself. Many of them are. And over the last year and a half, I've gotten much better at them. And as my eye has gotten refined a little bit to work, because I work very small. They're like 3 by 4 or 4 by 4 square.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's the size.
Gotcha.
So they're very small. Every once in a while they get bigger, and then they're annoying.
Okay.
It becomes annoying. It becomes a project. If it gets much bigger than that, it becomes a project. And they're not supposed to be projects. They're supposed to be like a way for me to start my day in art, quietly, and inward focused.
And are you hand stitching only? Do you use a machine?
Yeah, I only hand stitch. Sometimes I'll use pieces, leftover bits that were machine stitched previously and incorporate them, but I only attach them to my base fabric by hand stitching. Okay. And in the hand stitching, my rule is you cannot take a stitch out, because then it becomes a project, and then you start getting nitpicky and focused on what doesn't look right. And it's supposed to be more wabi-sabi than that. Just, each stitch is perfect as it lays.
Wabi-sabi, is that a particular, is it more like timey-wimey?
No, wabi-sabi is actually a Japanese philosophy.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes. And it's about beauty in the imperfections, and about not being perfectionistic about everything, and just kind of taking things as they are. But it is a way for me, because I am a perfectionist. I can get so into making everything perfect that it just becomes dreadful instead of an enjoyable process. Okay, I start off with a base fabric, and I pre-cut these ahead of time so that I have a big pile, so I don't have to stop and think, what am I going to stitch on? And I like to use flannel. I've experimented with a lot of different base fabrics. I don't like batting. It's too fat and poofy. Flannel just feels really nice, and that's part of this whole process, is how does it feel? Because I'm just so tactile. I want to touch everything. If you come in my studio, I'm going to be like, oh, let me touch your shirt. That's a nice scarf.
I've done that.
I pat people, pet them.
So socially awkward.
Yes, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I remember to ask, can I touch that? But sometimes I'm just like, oh, let me touch your coat. That's okay. But when it's like their blouse, it's kind of, so I start with flannel. A nice soft flannel base. And like I said, I pre-cut these into 4x4s and to 3x4s. I used to rip them all just as I was going, but I found, over the year I've been trying to eliminate all the stops, because anytime we're trying to do something on a daily basis, it's the littlest things that stop us, like, oh, the flannel's downstairs and I don't have any cut. So then I'll be like, I'll do that later. And then my meditation never gets done for the day. So I just make a big pile and keep those in my little stationette. And I have two stations. I have one at home and one at the studio. In the studio, it's more in a drawer, and then I just pull it all out like this in a pile. At home, I have a little tiered rolling cart that I have. I actually have it separated and organized. Like, here's my big pieces of fabric, and here's my little tiny pieces, and here's ribbons and trims, and here's all my threads and scissors, and it's very organized, because that was another thing I found, was that when I had them in baskets all over the place, I didn't do it because, well, all my fabric was wrinkled, and I didn't want to go downstairs to iron it, that sort of thing. And at the studio, I just have a drawer, so I kind of pulled out a bunch of stuff from my drawer, and some of it is gifts from other people. This was some hand-dyed fabric from a friend. This is hand-dyed fabric from another artist who did lots of work. These are scarf scraps from Johnny Venezia, from his silk scarves. Aren't these gorgeous?
Yeah, they are.
Silk charmeuse. Yeah, I like using those. Dyed lace. These are fabrics from a project I just finished. So sometimes if they're sitting out, they become cannibalized to go into the stitch meditations.
Gotcha.
But generally, it's a drawer full of my little scraps, nothing big, I have, just little scraps of painted papers. This is some tissue paper I painted, some Tyvek that I painted. That's kind of gold, shiny when I need a little bit of gold. It's kind of an art paper. So I don't throw anything away. Could be a problem.
Could be.
Could be.
But if you organize it and put it
right.
away, it's not a problem, right?
Right, so I keep it organized. I have drawers and everything's labeled, and I find that when I'm working, I make a mess, but I have to have it all tidy in order to create.
Right.
So it's like after I make, then it all goes away.
Okay, and then what else do you bring to the table to make sure that you have everything together?
My scissors, my favorite Havel scissors. I usually have the big ones and the little ones around, because I'm just cutting and ripping fabric usually for these. I don't measure. I just kind of eyeball stuff. I try and rip it whenever possible.
Right.
Because I like that frayed raw edge, so that's always fun. And then threads. In here I have an assortment of spaghetti, which is a 12-weight thread, and pearl cotton, which is 8-weight, and a little bit of metallic. Sometimes I use that. But I use any kind of thread. I use regular sewing thread. I use really fine threads sometimes. It depends on if I want the thread to be a major part of it. But generally I stick with the heavier threads, 12-weight to 8-weight, maybe a 40-weight.
Have you found that the fabrics that you pick have a lot or a little bit to do with your mood, or more of a point that you want to get across, or a feeling?
It's always about a feeling. It's or just like what is really happening in my life. So in the winter, I tend to do a lot of more pale things, or the contrast. I'm so tired of looking at white, beige, and blue sky, snow and weeds, that I pick really bright colors. It's like, I need a counterpoint to this. But sometimes I'm really doing what's out my window, how I feel.
So they could be landscapes.
Some of them actually turn into landscapes.
How interesting.
But I don't ever plan them. I put my base down, and then I grab a piece of fabric that is like, okay, oh, I like this today, so we'll look at this. And then I'll just snip it and rip it smaller, put it down. Like I said, I don't measure. I just kind of go, okay, who wants to play with you? And what's next? So, well, let's not go too far afield here. This one looks lovely, but this is like going to overpower that little thing. So I'm going to cut it here. I want this little bit of orangey color in here. Put that down. Maybe I'll go that way. And then I'll just go, all right, we need one more piece to go in here. Do I have a piece of fabric, paper? What do I have that goes in here? And sometimes it'll be something that doesn't really go, like this doesn't really go, but no, I think maybe I'll do something else with that. I just kind of audition things. Maybe a nice beigey color. Ooh, that's going to need a little bit more brown. Here we go. That's it. And I don't worry about getting them exact size. I have them overlapping. This fabric only tears in one direction. Sometimes you find that fabric only tears in one direction, especially with the silks or silk blends. Get those yummy raw edges up. So I'll start with this. That's kind of how I start with my base. And then I go, okay, I need a thread. What color thread do I want to use? Maybe some blue? No. It could be this. So then I start stitching. And usually when I have a lot of loose pieces, I will just take them off to start. And I go around the outside edge. Just clip off the parts that are going to annoy me. And generally I start with just doing a running stitch right along the outside edge. Sometimes I knot my thread on the front instead of the back, just because I can. One of the things I like about doing the stitch meditations is there just aren't any rules, because it's a collage and I'm making it up, and it's just to please me. I'm not thinking about anything other than pleasing myself. I talked a little bit about the stitches going in and being perfect the way they are and not ever taking them out. And some of that's because have found over time that the stitches reflect my state of being. It's when everything is calm and relaxed in my life, my stitches tend to be very even and consistent. And when I've got a lot going on, they're much less consistent. And sometimes I try to make them inconsistent on purpose, trying to fight that perpetual need to be perfect. And so this really has helped me become less obsessed with perfection. Then I have to decide what I want to do next. I just kind of look at it. Sometimes I just have to sit here with it for a little bit. I think I want to put some stitching on here. Again, if I was trying to match everything, if I was trying to match that blue exactly, I would get more frustrated in the whole projectness of it rather than the process of it. I read something once about artist's job is not to, our job is just to make it, not to judge it. We just keep making and leave the judgment to somebody else, because artists we're our own worst enemies most of the time in being in judgment of our work. I find I do things in threes a lot lately. 3 lines, and that's good. I don't want to do 5 lines or 7 lines or 4 lines. I just want to do 3 lines. Decided to add some texture. This fabric has got so much yummy patterning in it. I just wanted to add some texture, so I'm going to do a bunch of loopy French knots, kind of along the edge. You know, sometimes it's not till I'm halfway through a piece or almost done where I go, oh, I bet I picked these really calm, subdued colors today because I want to get into that more introspective space in the next couple days as we get to the new year and work on my plans for my business and my art. And so it kind of makes sense that I picked something very calming. I know a lot of people don't like French knots, but I find them so relaxing. It's done. Okay, this one's done. And usually they tell me when they're done. I know that I have to keep adding and stitching, and then all of a sudden it says, I'm done. I know that sounds a little flaky, maybe, but when you're really focused on the piece, you're kind of one with it, and that sounds kind of dorky too, but it is a meditation, and it tells you when it's done. So it's done.